Well, good evening, everyone. Come on in, get around the fire. I'll read you a story tonight. Once you get comfortable. It's from a book, Animal Heroes, by Ernest Thompson Seton. A little interesting. You see, a hero. I don't know what you consider a hero, but in my opinion, a hero is an individual with unusual gifts, achievements, whether it be a man or an animal. Now, this definition applies, and it is the histories of such that appeal to the imagination, to the hearts of those that hear about them here in the glow of our campfire. I invite you to join us on a journey through the wild, where courage takes many forms, unexpected champions emerge from the animal kingdom. These are tales of creatures. They defy the odds. They show bravery, loyalty, and even intelligence in many cases that rivals our own. Now, we all know people that are not as smart as our dog, right? From the loyal dog all the way to the wild beast, the stories I'm going to read you reveal that heroes can be found in places you don't really expect. And sometimes the wildest hearts are the truest hearts. So find a place to sit. Get in close to that fire. It's cold out tonight. Listen to these stories. These are the stories of animal heroes, each one leaving an indelible mark on the world around them, reminding us that bravery isn't bound by words. It lives in actions, in instincts, in the untamed spirit of the wild. This story's named Snap. It's the story of a Bull Terrier. It was dusk on Halloween when I first saw him. Early in the morning, I had received a telegram from my college buddy, Jack. "Am sending you a remarkable pup. Be polite to him. It's safer." It would have been just like Jack to have sent a skunk and called it a pup. So I waited the delivery with curiosity. When it arrived, I saw the package that was marked dangerous. And there came from within a high-pitched snarl at every slight provocation. On peering through the wire netting, I saw it was not a baby tiger, but a small white bull terrier. He snapped at me, and at anyone else or anything it seemed to be too abrupt or too near for proper respect. And his snarling growl was unpleasantly frequent. Dogs have two growls. One deep rumbled and chesty. Now that's a polite warning. And the other one's mouthy and much higher in pitch. Now this is the last word before the actual attack. The terrier's growls were all about the latter kind. Now I was a dog lover. I thought I knew all about dogs. So, dismissing the delivery man, I got out my all-round jackknife and lifted the netting. Oh yeah, I knew all about dogs. That little furry had been growling out a whole-souled growl for every tap of the tool, and when I turned the box on its side, he made a dash straight for my legs. Had not his foot gone through the wire netting and held him back, I might have been hurt, for his heart was evidently in his work. But I jumped up on the table out of reach, and I tried to reason with him. Now, I've always believed in talking to animals. I maintain that they gather something of our intentions, at least, even if they don't understand our words. But the dog evidently put me down for a hypocrite and scorned my approaches. At first, he took his post under the table, kept up a circular watch for a leg trying to get down. Now, I felt sure I could have controlled him with my eye, but I could not bring it to bear where I was or whether where he was. Thus, I was a prisoner on my table. Now, I'm a very cool person in normal situations. I got out a cigarette and I smoked while standing on the table, while my little tyrant below kept watch for my legs. I got out the telegram and I read it. "Remarkable pup. Be polite to him. It's safer." I think it was my coolness rather than my politeness that did it. For in about a half hour the growling ceased. In an hour he no longer jumped at a newspaper curiously pushed over the edge to test his humor. Possibly the irritation of the cage was wearing off, and by the time I had lit my third cigarette, he waddled out to the fire and lay down. Well, not ignoring me, However, I had no reason to complain of that kind of contempt. He kept one eye on me. I kept both eyes, not on him, but on his stumpy tail. So if that tail would swing sideways once, I should feel I was winning. But it didn't swing. So I got a book and put in time on that table till my legs were cramped and the fire burned low. About 10 p.m., it was chilly, and at 10:30, the fire was already out. My Halloween present got up, yawned and stretched, then crawled under my bed, where he found a fur rug. By stepping lightly from the table to the chair to the top of the dresser, I also reached my bed, and very quietly undressing, got in without provoking any criticism from my master. I had not yet fallen asleep when I heard a slight scrambling and felt thump-thump on the bed, then over my feet and legs. Snap evidently had found it too cool down below and proposed to have the best that my house offered. He curled up on my feet in such a way that I was very uncomfortable, and I tried to readjust matters, but the slightest wriggle of my toe was enough to make him snap at it so fiercely that nothing but thick wool blankets saved me from being maimed for life. I was an hour moving my feet, a hair's breadth at a time, till they were so that I could sleep in comfort, and I was awakened several times during the night by angry snarls from the dog. I suppose because I dared to move a toe without his approval, though once I believe he did it simply because I was snoring. Now, in the morning I was ready to get up before Snap was. You see, I call him Ginger Snap, Snap for short. Some dogs are hard to name, and some do not seem to need it. They kind of name themselves. Well, I was ready to rise at 7. Snap was not ready till 8, so we rose at 8. He had little to say to the man who made the fire. He allowed me to dress without doing it on the table. As I left the room to get some breakfast, I remarked, "Snap, my friend, some men would whoop you into a different way, but I think I know a better plan. The doctors nowadays favor the no breakfast cure. Now I'm going to try that." It seemed cruel, but I left him without food all day long. It cost me something to repaint the door where he'd scratched it up, but at night he was quite ready to accept a little food at my hands. Now, in a week, we were pretty good friends. He would sleep on my bed now and allow me to move my feet without biting at him, intent to do me some serious bodily harm. The no breakfast cure had worked wonders. In 3 months, we were, well, simply man and dog, and he amply justified the telegram he came with. He seemed to be without fear. If a small dog came nearby, he wouldn't take the slightest notice. If a medium-sized dog, he would stick his stub of a tail rigidly up in the air, then walk around him, scratching contemptuously with his hind feet and looking at the sky, the distance, the ground, anything but the dog, and noting his presence only by frequent, high-pitched growls. If the stranger did not move on at once, the battle began, and then the stranger usually moved on very rapidly. Snap sometimes got worsted, but no amount of sad experience could ever inspire him with a grain of caution. Once, while riding in a cab during the dog show, Snap caught sight of an enormous St. Bernard taking a whiz. Its size aroused such enthusiasm in this pup's little breast that he leaped from the cab window to do battle, and in doing so he broke his leg. Evidently, fear had been left out of his makeup, and in its place, supplied with an extra amount of ginger, which was the reason for his full name, he differed from all other dogs I've ever known. For example, if a boy threw a stone at him, he ran not away, but towards the boy, and if that crime was repeated, Snap took the law into his own hands. Thus, he was at least respected by all. Only myself and the porter at the office seemed to realize his good points, and we only were admitted to the high honor of personal friendship, an honor which I appreciated more as the months went on. And by midsummer, no one could have raised money enough to buy a quarter of a share in my little dog, Snap. Though not a regular traveler, my job dictated a road trip that next autumn. and then Snap and the landlady were left together, with unfortunate developments: contempt on his part, fear on hers, and hate on both. Arriving in Mendoza in North Dakota, I had a contract with the Penroof brothers' cattle ranch to replace a lot of barbed wire on the ranch. My letters were forwarded once a week, and I got several complaints from the landlady about Snap. One cannot be long in cow country without hearing a great deal about the depredations of the ever wily and destructive gray wolf. The day had gone by when they can be poisoned wholesale, and they are a serious drain on the rancher's profits. The Penroof brothers, like most live cattlemen, had given up all attempts at poisoning and trapping, and were trying various breeds of dogs as wolf hunters, hoping to get a little sport out of the necessary work of destroying the pests. Foxhounds had failed. They were too soft for fighting. Great Danes were too clumsy, and greyhounds could not follow the game unless they could see it. Now each breed had some fatal defect, but the cowmen hoped to succeed with a mixed pack, and the day when I was invited to join in a Mendoza wolf hunt, I was amused by the variety of dogs that followed. There were several mongrels, but there were also a few highly bred dogs. In particular, some Russian wolfhounds that must have cost a lot of money. Hilton Penroof, the oldest boy, the master of hounds, was unusually proud of them and expected them to do great things. Greyhounds are too thin-skinned to fight a wolf. Danes are too slow, but you'll see the fur fly when the Russians take a hand, he said. Thus the greyhounds were there as runners, the Danes as heavy backers, and the Russians to do the important fighting. There were also 2 or 3 foxhounds, whose fine noses were relied on to follow the trail if the game got out of view. It was a fine sight as we rode away among the Badland buttes that October day. The air was bright and crisp, and though so late, there was neither snow nor frost. The horses were fresh, and once or twice showed me how a cow pony tries to get rid of his rider. The dogs were keen for sport, and we did start 1 or 2 gray spots in the plain that Hilton said were wolves or coyotes. The dogs trailed away at full cry, but at night, beyond the fact that one of the greyhounds had a wound on his shoulder, there was nothing to show that any of them had been on a wolf hunt. "It's my opinion your fancy Russians are no good, Hilt," said Garvin, the younger brother. "I'll back that little black Dane against the lot, mongrel and all, as he is." "I don't understand it," growled Hilton. "There ain't a coyote, let alone a gray wolf, can run away from them greyhounds. Them foxhounds can follow a trail 3 days old, and the Danes could lick a grizzly." "I reckon," said his father, "they can run, and they can track, and they can lick a grizzly maybe, but the fact is they don't want to tackle a gray wolf. The whole darn pack is scared, and I wish we had our money out of 'em." Thus the men grumbled, disgust, as I drove away and left them. There seemed only one solution to the failure. The hounds may be swift and strong, but the gray wolf seems to terrorize all dogs. They just don't have the nerve to face him, and so, each time that the wolf got away, my thoughts flew back to that fearless little dog that had shared my bed for the last year. How I wished he was out here. Then these lubberly giants of hounds would find a leader whose nerve would not fail at the moment of trial. After a couple of days, I got another batch of forwarded mail, including 2 letters from the landlady. The first to say that beast of a dog was acting up scandalous in my room, and the other, still more forcible, demanding his immediate removal. Why not have him shipped to Mendoza, I thought. Why, it's only 20 hours. They'll be glad to have him. I can take him home with me when we're finished. Well, my next meeting with Ginger Snap was not as different from the first as one might expected. He jumped on me, made much vigorous pretense to bite, and growled frequently, but it was a deep-chested growl, and his stump waggled hard. The Penroofs had had a number of wolf hunts since I'd arrived, and were much disgusted at having no better success than before. The dogs could find a wolf nearly every time they went out, but they couldn't kill him. and the men were not near enough at the finish to learn why. Now, old Penroof was satisfied that there wasn't one of them whole miserable gang that had the grit of a jackrabbit. Well, we were off at dawn the next day, the same procession of fine horses and superb riders, the big blue dogs, the yellow dogs, the spotted dogs, as before. But there was a new feature, a little white dog that stayed close by me. Any dog or horse that came too near were apt to get a surprise from his teeth. I think he quarreled with every man, horse, and dog in the country, with the exception of another Bull Terrier belonging to the Mendoza hotel man. She was the only one smaller than himself, and they seemed very good friends. I shall never forget the view of the hunt I had that day. We were on one of those large, flat-headed buttes that gives a kingdom to the eye when Hilton, who had been scanning the vast country with glasses, he exclaimed, "I see him! There he goes, towards Skull Creek. Guess it's a coyote." Now, the first thing is to get the greyhounds to see the prey. That's not an easy matter, as they cannot use the binoculars, and the ground was covered with sagebrush higher than the dog's head. But Hilton called, "Huh, huh, Dander," and leaned aside from his saddle, holding out his foot at the same time. With one agile bound, Dander leaped to the saddle and stood there, balancing on the horse, while Hilton kept pointing. "There he is, Dander. Sick 'em. See him down there?" The dog gazed earnestly where his master pointed, then seemed to see him. He sprang to the ground with a slight yelp and sped away. The other dogs followed after, in an ever-lengthening procession, and we rode as hard as we could behind them. But, losing time, for the ground was cut with gullies, spotted with badger holes, and covered with rocks and sage that made full speed just too hazardous. So we all fell behind, and I was last, of course, being least accustomed to the saddle. We got several glimpses of the dogs flying over the level plain or dropping from sight in gully to reappear on the other side. Now Dander, the greyhound, he was a recognized leader, and as we mounted another ridge, we got sight of the whole chase. It was a coyote at full speed, the dogs a quarter of a mile behind, but closing. When next we saw them, the coyote was dead, and the dogs sitting around all panting, all but two of the foxhounds and Ginger Snap. "Too late for the fracas," remarked Hilton, glancing at these last foxhounds. Then he proudly petted Dander. "Didn't need your perp after all, you see. Takes a heap of nerve for 10 big dogs to face one little coyote," remarked the father sarcastically. "Wait till we run onto a wolf." Next day we were out again, for I made up my mind to see it to the finish. Now from a high point, we caught sight of a moving speck of gray. A moving white speck stands for antelope, a red speck was a fox, a gray speck for either gray wolf or coyote, and which of these is determined by his tail. If the glass shows the tail down, it's a coyote. If it's up, it is the hated gray wolf. Dander was shown the game as before and led the motley mixed procession, just as he had before. Greyhounds, wolfhounds, foxhounds, Danes, Bull Terrier, and horsemen. We got a momentary view of the pursuit. A gray wolf it surely was this time, loping away ahead of the dogs. Somehow I thought the first dogs were not running so fast now as they had after the coyote. But no one knew the finish of the hunt. The dogs came back to us one by one, and we saw no more of that wolf. Sarcastic remarks and recrimination were now freely indulged in by the hunters. "Paw, scairt, plumb scairt," was the father's disgusted comment of the pack. "They could catch up easy enough, but when we turned on 'em, they lighted out for home. Pah! Now where's that unsurpassable, fearless, scared-of-nuttin' terrier?" asked Hilton scornfully. "I don't know," said I. "I'm inclined to think he never saw the wolf, but if he ever does, I'll bet he sails in for death or glory." Well, that very night, several cows were killed close to the ranch, and we were spurred on to another hunt. It opened up much like the last. Late in the afternoon, we sighted a gray fellow with a tail up, not a half a mile off. Hilton called Dander up onto the saddle. I acted on that idea, and I called Snap up to mine, His legs were so short that he had to leap several times before he made it, scrambling up at last with my foot as a halfway station. I pointed and sicked for a minute before he saw the game, and then he started out after the greyhounds, already gone, with energy that was full of promise. Now the chase this time led us, not to the rough breaks along the river, but toward that high open country, for reasons that appeared later. We were close together as we rose to the upland and sighted the chase just a half a mile off, just as Dander came up with the wolf and snapped at his haunch. The gray wolf, he turned round to fight, and we had a fine view. The dogs came up by twos and threes, barking at him in a ring, till at last that little white one rushed up. He wasted no time barking, but rushed straight at the wolf's throat and missed it, yet seemed to get him by the nose. Then the 10 big dogs closed in, and in just 2 minutes, that wolf was dead. We had ridden hard to be in at the finish, and though our view was distinct, we saw at least that Snap had lived up to the telegram, as well as my promises for him. Now it was my turn to crow, and I did not lose the chance. Snap had shown him how, and at last that Mendoza pack had killed a gray wolf without any help from the men. There were 2 things to mar the victory somewhat. First, it was a young wolf, just kind of a cub, hence this foolish choice of country. Second, Snap was wounded. The wolf had given him a bad cut in the shoulder. As we rode in proud procession home, I saw he limped a little. "Here," I cried, "come up, Snap." He tried once or twice to jump, but he couldn't. "Here, Hilton, lift him up to me." "Thanks, I'll let you handle your own rattlesnakes," was the reply. For all knew now that it was not safe to meddle with his person. "Here, Snap, take hold," I said, and held my quirt to him. He seized it, and by that, with his teeth sunk in that leather, I lifted him to the front of my saddle and carried him home. I cared for him as though he'd been a baby. He had shown those cattlemen how to fill that weak place in their pack. The foxhounds may be good, and the greyhounds swift, and the Russians and Danes are fighters, but they're no use at all without that crowning moral force of grit that none can supply so well as a bull terrier. On that day, the cattlemen learned how to manage the wolf question. As you will find if ever you are at Mendoza, for every successful wolf pack there has with it a bull terrier, preferably of the Snap Mendoza breed. Next day was Halloween, the anniversary of Snap's coming into my life. Though not his real birthday, I considered it as such since it had been on Halloween the previous year when he'd showed up in that delivery box from a friend. The weather was clear, bright, not too cold, and there was no snow on the ground. The men usually celebrated the day with a hunt of some sort, and now, of course, wolves were the one object. To the disappointment of all, Snap was in bad shape with his wound. He slept, as usual, at my feet, and the bloody stains now marked the place. He was not in condition to fight, but we were bound to have a wolf hunt, so he was beguiled to an outhouse and locked up while we went off. I, at least with a sense of impending disaster. I knew we should fail without my dog, but I did not realize how bad a failure it was to be. Afar among the buttes of Skull Creek we had roamed when a white ball appeared bounding through the sagebrush, and in a minute more Snap came, growling and stump-waggling up to my horse's side. I could not send him back. He would take no such orders, not even from me. His wound was looking bad. So I called him, held down my quirt, and jumped him onto my saddle. "There," I thought, "I'll keep you safe till we get home." Yes, I thought, but I reckon not with Snap. The voice of Hilton, "Huh, huh," announced that he had sighted a wolf. Dander and Riley, his rival, both sprang to the point of observation, with the result that they collided and fell together, sprawling in the sagebrush. But Snap, gazing hard, had sighted that wolf, not so very far off, and before I knew it, he leaped from the saddle and bounded, zigzag, high, low, in and under the sage, straight for the enemy, leading the whole pack for a few minutes. Not for far, of course, but the great greyhounds sighted the moving speck, and the usual procession strung out on the plain. It promised to be a fine hunt, for the wolf, He only had about a half-mile start, and all the dogs were fully interested. "Now they've turned up Grizzly Gully," cried Garvin. "This way, and we can head 'em off." So we turned and we rode hard around the north side of Homer's Butte, while the chase seemed to go around the south side. We galloped to the top of Cedar Ridge, and we were about to ride down when Hilton shouted, "By George, here he is! We're right on to him!" He leapt from his horse, dropped the bridle, and ran forward, and I did the same. A great gray wolf came lumbering across an open plain toward us. His head was low, his tail was out level, and 50 yards behind him was Dander, sailing like a hawk over the ground, going twice as fast as the wolf. In a minute the hound was alongside and snapped, but bounded back as the wolf turned on him. They were just below us now and not 50 feet away. Garvin drew his revolver, but in a fateful moment Hilton interfered. No, let's see it out." In a few seconds the next greyhound arrived, then the rest in order of swiftness. Each of them came up full of fight and fury, determined to go right in and tear that gray wolf to pieces. But each, in turn, swerved aside and leapt and barked around at a safe distance. After a minute or so, the Russians appeared. Fine big dogs they were. Their distinct intention, no doubt, was to dash right at the old wolf. But his fearless front, his sinewy frame, and that death-dealing jaws awed them long before they were near him, and they also joined the ring, while the desperado in the middle faced this way and that, ready for any or all. Now the Danes came up, huge-limbed creatures, any one of them as heavy as the wolf. I heard their heavy breathing tighten into a threatening sound as they plunged ahead, eager to tear the foe to pieces. But when they saw him there, grim, fearless, mighty of jaw, tireless of limb, and ready to die if need be, but sure of this, he would not die alone. Well, those Great Danes, all three of them, were stricken, as the rest had been, with a sudden bashfulness. Sure, they would go right in presently, not now, but as soon as they had caught their breath. They were not afraid of a wolf. Oh, no. I've read their courage in their voices. They knew perfectly well that the first dog to go in was going to get hurt. But never mind that. Presently, they would bark a little more to get up enthusiasm. And as the 10 big dogs were leaping round that silent wolf at bay, there was a rustling in the sage at the far side of place. Then a snow-white rubber ball, it seemed, came bounding, but grew into a little Bull Terrier. And Snap, slowest of the pack, and last, came panting hard, so hard he seemed gasping, over the level open he made, straight to the changing ring around that cattle killer, whom none dared face. Did he hesitate? Not for an instant. Through the ring of the yelping pack, straight for that old despot of range, right for his throat he sprang, and the old gray wolf struck with his 20 cinctures. But the little one, if fooled at all, sprang again, and then what came I hardly knew. There was a whirling mass of dogs. I thought I saw the little white one clenched on that gray wolf's nose. The pack was all around. We could not help them now, but they did not need us. They had a leader of dauntless mettle, and when in a little while the final scene was done, there on the ground lay the great gray wolf, a giant of his kind, and clenched on his nose with that little white dog. The wolf was dead, and I hallooed to Snap, but he did not move. I bent over him. "Snap, Snap, it's all over. You killed him." But the dog was very still, and now I saw 2 deep wounds in his body. I tried to lift him. "Let go, old feller, it's all over," he growled feebly, and at last he let go of that wolf. The rough cattlemen were kneeling around him now. Old Penroof's voice was trembling as he muttered, "I wouldn't had him hurt for 20 steers." I lifted him in my arms, called to him, and stroked his head. He snarled a little, a farewell as it proved, for he licked my hand, and as he did so, then never snarled again. That was a sad ride home for me. There was the skin of a monstrous wolf, but no other hint of triumph. We buried the fearless one on a butte back of the ranch house. Penroof, as he stood by, was heard to grumble, "By jingo, that was grit, clear grit. You can't raise cattle without grit." Well, now that's a pretty good story right there. It's always sad to lose a pet. My gosh. It hurts as much as anything you ever gone through. But it's worth it. And given the chance to witness the fearlessness of a little dog like that, taking on a full-grown wolf, that's a heck of a story. Well, are you thinking of a nice gift to give for the holidays? Folks, I want you to sink your teeth into the piece of the Old West. Now, Ginger's making these cowboy caramels. Now, they're great. They're all natural. They're handmade caramels. The real deal, I'm telling you. They're crafted with pure butter, real sugar, fresh cow's milk. Just like the one cowboys enjoyed around the campfire back in the day. No artificial flavors. No high fructose corn syrup. Just rich, velvety sweetness. Now, I've had a couple of them. Doggone, they're good. They just melt in your mouth and they keep you coming back for more. Every bite takes you on a journey back to simpler time when real ingredients made all the difference. Fun flavors too, like Whiskey on My Mind, Amaretto by Morning, Legends of the Fall, and the Salty Cowboy. 12 different flavors in all, 12 of them. Treat yourself to a taste of the untamed frontier. Available in our merchandise store. All you have to do is just find the shop button in the description and you grab a box or a bag today. It's real simple. Well, folks, I'm going to read you some more of these stories. I like them. I hope you like them too. Enjoy the fire, and I'll be with you again soon. Till then, it's Clay Steele.